There is a tidal wave of Americans who are retiring as the last of the baby boomers, that generation born between 1946 and 1964, are wrapping up long careers. In fact, the AARP estimates 7 people retire every minute in the U.S. I'm Kathy Wurzer. Tonight on WDSE WRPT, we're bringing you a special hour-long program to explore how those facing retirement can prepare for this life-changing transition. We'll have conversations in the studio with experts and stories of those who are discovering new purpose and meaning, and in some cases, even reinventing themselves in retirement. Let's talk about your future next on Illuminate, defining the next chapter.
A few years ago, my wife and I sort of sat down and said, well, what are we going to do with this retirement thing? We have to figure out a way to continue to give back.
I'm not very good at retiring.
We both planned to save money to get ready for retirement.
I don't really know where I'm going and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm not unhappy with that.
It's been really important for us to let go of that old identity and establish a new one.
Welcome to you at home and to our live studio audience for this new WDSE annual series we're calling Illuminate. Our goal is to shed light on topics that are frequently left in the dark. One of those subjects is retirement. Now, retirement sounds great, right? The day-to-day grind is over, you can relax into a new chapter of your life. But let's face it, it's scary too. There are the usual questions about finances, but there are other deeper questions to think about too. What are you going to do when you're retired? How can you lead an enriching, fulfilling life? For the next hour, we'll meet people making that next step, find out about their journey, and talk to experts with some tips for how you can prepare. We'll begin with the story of Vic and Audrey Moen of Grand Rapids. The couple retired last month, and we interviewed them just before they departed on an 8-month RV trip around the country, where they hope to figure out what's next for them.
28 years. We just celebrated our anniversary this past September. We have 2 daughters. We have 2 grandchildren. I've known about my pension and retirement date for 30 years.
We both planned throughout our lives, growing up, to save money to get ready for retirement. That was just drilled into both of us.
I had a countdown calendar on my smartphone. Have I really 25 years ago, really thought about the details of what it really means. No, I did not. Hey, Dakota.
I watched people that 2 weeks after they retire, they die. I watched and met people that their blood pressure is so high that it's affected their health to such a degree that they can't enjoy the retirement they had hoped for.
I also know people that have said, I'm not very good at retiring. They retire and then they're back within 2 months.
We want to be able to do this while we can. It was June, and he said, we got to make a decision. And then he also said, I want to do this with you. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty big thing. I've had 45 years of work experience in many different areas. I really love what I do. I love the people I work with. So when I had my last day on Monday, it was hard. It was really hard, promising myself I wasn't going to cry until I got home. I had a cup of tea and relaxed and realized that, you know what, it's just going to be just fine. And I didn't cry like I thought I would. It was a different journey for me than it was for Vic.
My whole career has been working in the field of corrections, probation and parole work, working with kids, working with adults. Just a couple more days and I turn my keys in. It's been really quite emotional. The work that you've done for so many years, there are many of these people I probably will never see again. It's surprisingly the emotions that have just all of a sudden just come over and take over you. We're leaving in about 2 weeks. I simply purchased this map and put it on a bulletin board and started putting push pins in some places that I'd like to see on this route. We have about 8,000 miles we want to cover.
We're going to go traveling and we have a camper. That camper is my toolbox. It's our way of being together to try to figure this out.
Just husband and wife, and get to know each other and do some planning to let go, of that kind of old identity and establish a new one, whatever that is.
We're so used to working 10, 12-hour days, being on the road, doing different things, being on call.
So my identity will be, yeah, I used to do that, but I'm retired now.
I don't need to go to work today, but I do need to have a purpose today.
I could only do so much hunting, so much fishing, so much woodworking, so much of this, and that might get you through a period of time, but eventually you probably get tired of some of that too.
It's going to be messy at times, and it's going to be good at times, and it's going to be baffling, but if you're really listening, I think, to what's around you and what's important, and remember your core values, then you can figure that out.
Wow. What a great adventure for Vic and Audrey as they chart a roadmap, literally, for their future. Well, as you prepare to leave the workforce, there can be fear and anxiety. Some will experience feelings of grief for the life they're leaving behind. We have a couple of experts with us in the studio right now who have helped many people figure out what comes next after retirement. Bonnie Hendrickson is the principal of Life Song Coaching in Grand Rapids and is a certified professional life coach. And Bill Lindberg is a master certified coach and president of the Ash Grove Group. That's a professional coaching firm in the Twin Cities. Came all the way up 35 to Duluth. Good to see you both. How are you?
Good.
Great. Fun to be here
Excellent.
with you.
Thank you. Now, Bill, I have heard from people who have made this leap that retirement is the most fruitful chapters of their life. Is that just good PR, or is that true?
Well, it can be both, and it depends on the situation. Vic and Audrey's planning, I think, will serve them well. And anchored in their values moving into this next chapter will be very beneficial to them. And giving that forethought and planning resources, so factors such as health, constraints of caregiving that you might encounter, all of these things impinge on your retirement. But I think the way Vic and Audrey have planned bodes well for their next phase. Part of the problem, too, is the language. When we speak of retirement, I don't think Vic and Audrey are retiring kind of people. My mentor, Frederick Hudson, talked about pro-retirement, which is a much more proactive approach to this phase of life. And so then I think it can be very fulfilling.
But we still, Bonnie, have folks who think that once they shut the door to the office or leave behind that job, it's just a downhill slide. As you get older, your body starts to break down. It's just a miserable mess. But that is not what you're thinking.
No, and actually there's a graphic image that kind of shows that. I think they're going to show it on the screen here in a minute or so. I think historically, people looked at life as an inverted bell curve. And, they were born, they went to grade school, they went to high school, they went to college, they got a job, and they kept climbing the curve, climbing up the side of the bell curve. And they reached the top, the pinnacle, the climax. We get to retire. And oh my gosh, it's a long way down. And that falling off the cliff produces fear and anxiety. And I think that's where a lot of people are. I was surprised to learn as I started working with people how many people experience pretty deep felt fear around leaving the workplace.
Well, because you've done something for 30, 40 plus years, and that's your identity.
Yes, and I also think it's because, I just lost my train of thought. We don't realize that in our generation, for those of us who are baby boomers, we have 20 to 30 years left. We have 20 to 30 years of good living that we get to do. Maybe we invent something. Baby boomers are well known for being entrepreneurial. Maybe we start a business. Maybe we work part-time. Maybe we volunteer. There's lots of opportunities available to us.
Let me ask you, Bill, about this, though, the loss of identity, because that really is a big thing. For so many people who have spent so much time at work, they become the work. And then when they are not doing that, there is this chasm. So how do you help those individuals?
It can be a huge chasm, first of all, and I know many people, and including myself in a life chapter, your business card becomes coextensive with your identity. And if there's not an underlying deeper purpose to that, it can be brutal. And just as Vic and Audrey described, they had very busy, structured lives. And one of the challenges that my clients face in making this leap is after leaving an intense, structured, very predictable set of life rhythms, and it's your neighborhood. In today's world, I think for many people, your workplace organization is your neighborhood. So if you go off that cliff of a highly structured existence, 12 to 14-hour days, and then you have an open calendar, it's very important to at least have a plan for doing that and be socially connected, or it can be a very serious problem in making that transition.
I can't tell you how many people say, what am I going to do with all the time?
I'd like to try, actually. I personally would like to try a little bit of that, but I have a long way to go, I guess. I have a friend who just retired, and he said, just leave me alone with this planning business. Why can't I just sit like a lump and just relax? I've worked now for 40 plus years. Get off my back about the planning. That doesn't sound like something that you would advise.
No, because I believe that not having a plan is a plan to fail. And I don't mean that it has to be a written plan or something that you've set smart goals about. I mean being intentional. And I think Bill would add to that the importance of setting intention that fits in line with your values and fits in alignment with your purpose. Because really, as people leave the workplace, one of the other big fears they have is that lack of meaning and purpose. So to have been taken time to actually think intentionally about what my purpose is and what I want the rest of my life to stand for helps them to direct.
I want to talk a little bit more about that. You're going to join me a bit later on in the program. Yeah. I want to go back, just kind of steer the ship a little bit, because we're going to talk about this too. Navigating these years, if you have a health issue or if you're caring for somebody who has a serious health issue, how do the medical problems under or overshadow what could be these wonderful possibilities?
Well, I'd like to say a word in behalf of vegging out for a while too, because your friend who is wanting to just be the lump, there's something to be said for that after an arduous career, just giving yourself the space and time to put together a plan. So if there's an intervening health episode, for example, 10 years ago this very week, I had been diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma and had a 5-hour surgery. And normally the prognosis for that is 4 to 9 months. But here I am. And so after facing into that pretty steep chasm, and I didn't want to be defined as just a melanoma patient or a melanoma survivor. So fortunately, a colleague had asked me to do a project, and I was able to retool that identity. But I think for many people in the pace of today's life, that can be exhausting in its own right. So having the option to veg out for a while isn't such a bad thing. But I think that can be toxic if it goes for too long. So it's, to Bonnie's point, I think you have a choice of living by default or living life with intention. Doesn't necessarily have to be a thorough plan. I think making room and being receptive to what comes your way is important, but at least having a trajectory in mind is sometimes very useful.
It's kind of fun to open yourself up to the possibility of doing something new, though, too, and taking that risk.
Exactly. And taking that risk, it's very stimulating. I mean, there's more data about that and how taking risk, trying something new, venturing out is healthy. It's mind stimulating. It's good for your body.
And of course, some people believe that older people do not like to take risk. You know, that you play it safe. And you're saying, no, go ahead,
well,
do
to
that.
my point, we have a whole new way to live than what our parents and grandparents did. We have 20, 30 years, and we can experience a lot of opportunity and possibility if we put ourselves out there.
All right.
A researcher at MIT calculated if you're healthy at 65, you probably have something like 8,000 days left. And I think some of the work I've encountered at AARP is an example. In the Minnesota AARP Executive Council, we hear so many stories of people taking risks, becoming entrepreneurial. one of the highest rates of entrepreneurship comes with women over 50.
I want to talk a little bit more about that later in the show. You two are fantastic. Thank you for setting the table for us. Good conversation. We're going to hear more from Bonnie and Bill a bit later on in the program. Well, next we have the story of a woman who found herself widowed at the age of 66. She benefited from Bonnie's compelling conversation series, which helped her shift perspective from 40+ years of couples awareness, empowering her to find her life purpose.
We sailed a bunch of different sailboats, and so we had catamarans. We were on the lake all the time. Billy was like a huge water boy. March of 2014 was when he retired. Our expectations, I think, were just to have continued fun. We knew how to just pack a bag, throw a bike in, and go for a ride. Because Billy was so healthy, I'm pretty healthy, you know, I mean, he rode his bike 3,000 miles a summer. You just don't really think that it's knocking at your door. He started to be sick in the beginning of 2017, had a cough and had lethargy. And we had doctored, but we couldn't find any answers. What they told us is you have 2 weeks to 3 months to live. We were always intentional. And so in that time, when we had appointments or whatever we were doing, I would bring a notebook. He showed me so many things. He took all of that time to really just help me be able to go on to think about myself and what I was going to do. We didn't expect death, but death came our way. Before he was diagnosed, I had about a month in there that we were just really wondering what was going on. And he's like, Berenice, do some art, because art just takes your mind off everything. And so I did 8 pieces, and I just really enjoyed that, and they will always be something I'll probably keep because of such an important time in our lives. When he died, I thought, am I ever really going to have fun again? I have a friend that's probably 15 years older than me, and I said to her, I said, Jean, did you go to any like grief support group? And she said, no, I didn't, but I went to Bonnie's Compelling Conversations.
With your family, with your kids, you know, this is how I need you to be.
She asked me questions that needed to be answered, to thinking about retirement, to being retired, to being in latter years of retirement. I mean, she had the full spectrum. So I learned both in the class and outside of the class. It was just a great way to have to really answer questions, like I said, for myself. But there were several of us there that were widows. And so she changed the program to apply to widows or widowers. And these women have just been around the block, and they have just great suggestions. And there's just a camaraderie that comes from this that I don't think I could find anyplace else. My question to myself was, can I be an adventurer? Because Billy was such an adventurer, and I had my own ideas, but it was like his ideas were always so much more fun. What Life Outside the Lines has done for me is it's like expanded that. Okay, yep, I am an adventurer. Now what does that mean, and how is that going to pan out? As far as where I'm going from here, I don't necessarily want to be a poster child for a widow, of being a widow, but I would like to be a poster child for how to have everything in order so that when you die, it's a peaceful and wonderful experience. I do know I will have a good future. I do know that I will have a great and adventurous life, and I do know that I will have purpose until I breathe my last.
Our next guest has had a long and successful career in journalism and currently juggles several media jobs. He's grappling over which of those jobs to keep after he steps back from full-time work. Robin Washington is a columnist, editor, documentary producer, and host of the weekly public affairs show on Wisconsin Public Radio called Simply Superior. I am so happy you are here, Robin. Welcome.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Kathy.
Well, you're a media survivor. Good for you. And a thriver.
There is such a thing
There
today.
is such a thing.
Yes.
I like that. I like that. You have a smorgasbord of options from which to choose here, my friend. Why is it important for you to feed your creativity going forward?
Well, we're talking about the next chapter, so I'm looking at like the whole book. And it's these books that I haven't written. And they're in me. It's time that they come out. You know what? I'm probably not going to write 20 novels.
Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
No.
So let's get one or two good ones out there, good books of some sort. A few years ago, when my daughter was in college, The Color of Water came out by James McBride.
Great.
And she read it and she said, "Dad, when are you writing your book? This guy just wrote your book. Only yours is funnier." Right? When are you writing your book? She's going to be 40 next year. And I didn't write this book yet.
You got to get
and
going.
I've got to get going. So, yeah, I mean, I love all these things I do. And you know how journalism is. Every story is like that book, every good story anyway.
And something's always new in the business.
That's right.
Right.
And
it's hard to step back, though, because you got the adrenaline going with this particular stuff that we like to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to kind of scale it back.
So it's discipline. And I have to look at the business, which is what it is. I'm writing for the Boston Globe editorial page. I produce for WGBH in Boston. I have my Wisconsin Public Radio show. I do American City Business Journal stories. Everything has to be looked at business-wise in like a cost-benefit square. So what's the least cost or least work for me, if you will, and the highest benefit? And I love them all, but you've got to look at it this way, and other things that I might take on too. So somewhere in there, we probably have to replace something we're doing with time for the book.
Let me ask you this.
And a musical.
It's
2/3 written.
You are amazing. Now, you heard Bill and Bonnie talk about a plan. Do you have a plan, or are you going to kind of ad-lib this a little bit?
Yeah, a little of each. Well, actually, that's important. And I think it goes back to journalism is in our blood, is in my blood. And it really is. Something comes up, and it doesn't matter what you were doing. You go and you chase that fire, So part of the plan is to recognize the plan may change. But you got to look at it as a business, which I guess a lot of journalists don't do. And so therefore, again, the cost-benefit square and what you really should be doing. I do have an adage, which is, are you having fun? Are you making money? And you should do at least one of those. But if you're not making money and you're not having fun, why are you doing it? And that comes from experience.
So much focus, though, when you retire. I think you're a person who's not going to fully retire. That's pretty clear to me. So much focus, though, is on the financial part of the equation.
Right.
And you don't look like you're not going to. 70 is the age I'm supposed to retire. And I'm wondering, is there a cost-benefit analysis to be done about?
So I have a little chart that you're setting up.
Okay.
And I'm 62. I'll be 63 next month. And 62 is an amazing age because I didn't know it was a special age. I thought 21 and 30 and all these. 62, you get all these mailings. Hey, take your Social Security. Don't take it. Come to our seminar. Free dinner. What are these? They're selling you something, right? Okay. What drives me nuts is all this stuff you see memes that say Americans are leaving trillions on the table by taking social early. That is not necessarily true. And this is my public service announcement. Because if you look at this chart, it shows that if you take it at 62 early, or if you have waited, it doesn't break even until about 82. That's right.
Really?
Am I going to live to 82? I hope so. My parents did not. So, should I plan for that? So seriously, my social is good. It's going to be good. If I take it next year, it'll be, again, pretty good. It's not something I necessarily need to live off of. My wife has done very well with our finances, so I won't be eating cat food. If I do, it's fancy feast. Okay, we'll be doing all right. But there's other charts that show, by the way, if you take it at 62 and you invest it, if you don't really need it, you will actually make more. So it depends. I mean, I'm not a financial planner, and I don't want to give anybody good or bad advice. I just want to tell you the options that are out there. It's part of the equation. As I go back to my cost-benefit square, if there's an account that isn't quite matching what my social might be or other streams of income, then why am I doing it? That may be time better spent doing the book, and maybe the social is paying for that.
Do you think that message is heard across all demographic, all cultural groups that are heading into retirement?
I think part of the reason I'm so passionate about this is I do think that lower economic groups and people who struggled, and believe me, they get to 62, they can't wait, they have to take this, okay? Which is why it just grates me when they say Americans are leaving money on the table. Not everybody has a choice, right? I don't want them to feel bad, like they're doing something bad or doing something wrong. So, you know, maybe I'll put this in a book or something, I don't know. But I do think that message is important.
Okay, before you go, so the first big project you're going to work on when you decide to take the leap?
Now that's what I got to work on. You know, it probably is my autobiography. I mean, it is a kind of wild story. Grew up in the civil rights movement in Chicago, black and Jewish family, taking a protest when I was 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. My mother was an artist. Her work is getting acclaimed now. I have to work on that. And it took me 30 years to realize this was an unusual life, and it ain't over yet.
It is not over yet. You are amazing, Robin. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, our next guest is going to help us think about the philosophical and spiritual perspective of retirement and reinventing yourself. He's a semi-retired professor at the College of St. Scholastica, a philosopher, and the current poet laureate of Duluth. Here's a poem from Gary Bollhauer.
One step. You ask about endings and beginnings, about being lost and being found, the grand scheme of orbits and eons. I only glimpse the common path. Young father at the playground pushes his daughter in the high arc of squealing laughter, the path of adventure and return, chains, gravity, and sky. Researcher in the auditorium fields questions about cancer cells and cure rates, then visits her mother at the infusion center on her way home. The same path, traced through the body. Florist arranges another funeral bouquet, saying the names of the dead, one bright blossom at a time. The same path, scattered with petals. Grandmother quilts dreams for the new arrival, the path made by stitches and prayers. So the journey goes, from flower to sweetness, small seed to sapling, from promise to constellation of desire, glint of light to the pure pulsing dark, the same path, dance and follow. Give up the illusion of aloneness and the stubborn story of control. Today, one close step on the common path.
What a gift. Gary Bollhauer is in studio right now. Thanks for sharing your poetry with us.
My pleasure.
It's beautiful. You had a line in there, being lost, being found. When you decided to kind of step back a little bit from your teaching, did you feel unmoored at first?
Well, I knew that I wanted to continue teaching to some degree. And it's kind of a, I don't know, a soft retirement or a semi-retirement. So I could continue doing the things that I was most passionate about, and I didn't have to go to meetings anymore. So that was a big deal. I got to keep the most important part.
You know, do you think, we've been talking here so far tonight about having some kind of a roadmap. Now, did you lead your life with a roadmap prior to semi-retirement? Do you think you need a roadmap going forward?
I think you need some idea about what you want to explore, the adventures you want to take, but I don't think that the roadmap should be so clear and so structured that you're not able to listen for the call. I think all of us hear calls from our community, from our own families, from our own children, from other people who call us into new kinds of things, to new adventures that perhaps we couldn't have planned.
It's so hard to hear the call sometimes, though.
And that's why also in retirement, I think We need to allow some space for silence, for listening for that call. And, whether that's meditation or journaling or a good walk in the park, it can take many forms, but I think to listen for that call is a critical piece of what we need to do in the senior years.
Let me ask you this. You are a philosopher. Do you find that meaning and purpose, is this an evolving question in one's life? Can your purpose change as you grow older, as you get into different phases of your life?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, there might be some values, some fundamental values that are constant, that are consistent throughout the years, but how you embody those, how you put them into practice, how you implement them can be quite different from stage to stage. I get concerned when I see older individuals being treated in our society as maybe less than because they're not doing what they were doing prior to retirement. I mean, we have a thread of ageism in this culture, I think. Very much so.
Right, and so we haven't really talked about that yet tonight. As we go into these next chapters of our lives, how do we carry ourselves in a culture that might not see older people as valued?
Boy, that's a really good question. And I think it takes a sense of self-confidence. It takes a sense of listening to that call and realizing that I still have passion, that I have critically important contributions to make to society. I think another part of that is to stay connected to people throughout the generations. Find a place where you can read to children. Find a new leader that you can mentor in your profession. Make some connections so that you don't have that sense that you're kind of only with the group of seniors, that you're still engaged in the larger community.
So hard too. I mean, isolation in this our society is really prevalent. Even though we're all connected with social media, so you have to really make an effort to not be in your shell in a sense.
That's right. You have to find those places where you can be in community. And for some people that means a church community. For some people that means a book group. A play reading group, can take so many different forms. A pickleball club, whatever it might be.
I've got to try pickleball.
It's
I've not
good.
done that
it's
yet.
Good.
I've not done that. So you mentioned a book club. I bet you do. You're an extensive reader. Do you have any recommended reading? Because I'm a big Parker Palmer fan, and I just got done with On the Brink of Everything. Love it.
Great book.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Really important book. And I think, Parker, for all of his writing, has emphasized this importance of listening to the call. He has another book called Let Your Life Speak. And we're never done with letting our life speak, right? We just have to find the new way to do that. And that may change. It may change over and over and over. So we might make a plan, but the plan, I don't think, should be so precise or so clear that we can't listen for what's the next adventure that might be calling us.
I'm so honored that you're the poet laureate here in Duluth and that you're sharing your poetry with us tonight. Is there something that you want to try yet here in the next few years of your life that you've not done?
I had a conversation today with a publisher to publish a children's book. So hopefully that's the next book coming out. And I have several children's stories that I've written over the years, and so I'm working with an illustrator, and hopefully maybe there'll be one or two children's books. I'd love that.
Great. You know what? I've had such a good time talking to you, Gary. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Kathy.
Absolutely. Gary Bollhauer. And by the way, we're going to be hearing more of Gary's poetry throughout the show. Well, next, we're going to see the story of a Native American couple who ventured off in a bold new direction upon retirement. WDSC producer Michael Lagarde brings us the story of Tom and Elizabeth Peacock and their efforts to start a nonprofit publishing company focusing on Native authors.
After a lifelong career in education, Tom Peacock has made several transitions in his life, from educator to writer, and now into retirement.
I spent many, many years at UMD, almost maybe a little over 20 years. And I retired from there in 2013. It was a natural kind of transition I had from being a teacher, academic to now being a writer. And then a few years ago, my wife and I sort of sat down and said, well, what are we going to do with this retirement thing? We have to figure out a way to continue to give back. We've been foster parents and teachers for many, many years, and we know something about the publishing industry, from the writer side, and said, let's try our hand at this publishing thing. So we put down a big list of names that thought we were going to decide on, and she came up with Black Bears and Blueberries.
Black Bears and Blueberries Publishing highlight their commitment to uplifting Native authors and illustrators from around our region.
Starting a nonprofit business is a tremendous amount of work, and we had no idea of the process, and so we started soliciting for illustrators and writers. We set up a web page, and we narrowed it down after reading those manuscripts, and we send them off to outside readers as well. And we decided on 2 initial publications. That's the other thing we decided, is that we're going to keep this thing small. We're going to keep it to paperbacks. They're inexpensive because we're self-funding. We don't take any income from this. Like I say, we live off the good graces of Social Security and University of Minnesota retirement system.
This business venture affords the couple the flexibility to enjoy their retirement while focusing on what they are most passionate about. It also provides hope that their work will influence future generations.
We know that we're filling a niche. We know that we're giving back, and hopefully we're going to be able to pass all the lessons of all the mistakes that we've made along the way, on to new younger folks in a couple of years, and we're going to continue to crank out, books that'll be read for years and years by Native children.
That's a great story. Well, our next guest recently retired from a long career as a photographer with the Duluth News-Tribune. After some initial trepidation about retirement, he has hit his stride and is enjoying this next chapter. He's written several books on astronomy and enjoys teaching folks about the night sky. I'm talking about Bob King. He still writes a weekly column on astronomy and is affectionately known around these parts as Astro Bob. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Kathy.
I can't believe a guy like you has worked in journalism all these years. You had some trepidation about retirement?
I don't know. Well, I loved my job. And when I look back now, almost a year later, I think, what a wonderful career. I just had a great time. There's a little bit of missing part of it, but it was such a joy when I look back that I don't feel like I need to go back, that I'm ready for other things now. And what's unusual is that I was a photographer then, and I wrote captions. That was the extent of my writing. Whereas now, it's very strange because I'm an author, and it feels odd to say that after being a photographer for so many years.
So it's only been a year when you stepped aside, not even a year.
Back in December.
Wow. Mm-hmm. How were your expectations different from reality?
I actually kind of walked right into another job, because I talked to a man before I retired, sometime before, and he said he had retired recently. He was in a position of great responsibility, and he regretted that he didn't have anything he could get his back up into after he retired. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, I should have something like that when I retire. And so I called my publisher and I offered an idea for a book. They eventually accepted. So I went from working at the paper, I took one day off basically, and then I began writing a book the day after that. So I started that project. So it was almost like, as Gary, the previous guest, said, I went into kind of a soft retirement, and I'm still at that spot too.
Have you had a chance to, though, relax at all? I mean, you know, this churn. I mean, writing is a difficult thing to do.
Yes, it's very hard work.
Yeah.
Yes, I have had a chance to relax. I think the main thing is being a photographer is that you're always on schedule. You'd get up in the morning, you'd think maybe you could take a shower before you went to work. No, you'd get a phone call that there was a protest at the pipeline. And so you'd be just running. And what I do really love about retirement, even though I've given myself, chosen to do work, is that it is my schedule now that I do. And I like that little bit of control back again on my own schedule. And so I'm doing some of the things I like to do in my own time frame. And that is liberating.
Do you miss, though, the camaraderie at work and the people at work? I mean, how about the social part of retirement? That can be kind of difficult for some people.
That is a great question. I really miss, especially the photo staff and the wonderful people I worked with. So it's funny, I just got together with them the other day for ice cream. So we still connect once in a while. We go to Dairy Queen or another ice cream place. And when I was with them yesterday, my first thought was I just looked at them like family, and I felt a very strong bond, like love. And so I was super happy to be there. But I walked away from the situation joyful, not regretful. So it was a very good time.
So you're writing. Now, do you want to try your hand at something else? I mean, what's on the list here for Astro Bob?
It's a little bizarre when I'm thinking about it, and I'm not sure I'm going to do this, but I've got a sneaky little idea in the back of my head that I'd like to play electric guitar.
Oh, you'd be a rockin'
Well, I'm
guitarist.
just hoping I need to do this before my fingers stiffen up. So far, they're still limber. But no, the other thing that I have time more to do, and my little bit of advice, I guess, is if you have any particular passion for anything, is normally during your work life, you have to put your passions to the side. Most of your energy goes to work. When you're retired, you can start taking any of those little passions or the inner voice that Gary spoke about and follow it and expand those passions, and that becomes your new life. And so in this new life, I've had more time to do teaching of astronomy and presentations about the night sky. And that is I see that as my basic purpose in life, which is just to share knowledge and especially beauty. And as long as I can keep doing that, I don't need to go back to work. I'm happy.
I love that. I love that. Do you, by the way, have you had a chance to maybe be almost because I love your attitude toward this. Have you had a chance to talk to other more recent retirees about how you're doing this and how you're navigating this chapter?
I haven't talked to too many people or retirees about it, but people who are considering retiring, I might say, you're going to like this, or you may want to consider that. But what I like about all of us is that we all are useful in some way. We have skills, and we can make connections and share whatever it is we love. And I think that sustains us past retirement into basically a new life, including potentially electric guitar playing.
I'll pay good money to watch you play electric guitar at Grandma's or something like that.
In a starry outfit under a beautiful moon.
So it sounds, some people say, well, actually almost every person I've talked to says, I should have retired earlier. I just love it. Are you under that caption?
Should have retired earlier? No, because I considered actually working longer because I really loved what I did. I liked being a photographer. I like the creativity involved in being, whenever you're creative at anything, that gives you a lot of energy. I love the people I met. So no, I could have stayed on a bit longer, but I moved into continuing to be creative. So
I'm so happy too. So good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, we've heard the stories of a number of retired or nearly retired folks during our show, but each one of us ultimately will need to find our own path toward what will be a fulfilling retirement. Our friend and poet Gary Bullhauer shared his thoughts on that in this poem.
This poem is called Your Own Story. It's about our own unique and particular choices that we make in creating our own story. Your own story, Come into your own story, the one that flows like molten lava from the pure fire in your gut. Not someone else's story, not the world's expectations, not the 7 easy steps that lead to guaranteed success and happiness. Enter the deep chamber at the center of the whirling world. Listen for the song only you can hear. Sing that song, not any other. Sing the few notes you've been given, like this wren that fills the whole morning with its persistent mercy. A small hollow of silence like a cupped hand. Then the small flute pours its canticle, trembling the bright air. Cracks open the day, rends the veil of darkness, lifts the fog away. Day after day, it claims its ancient aria. Every note a fractal of the sheer urge of the world that lures the green juice, calls the vital sap up from the ageless depths, and flares forth in ceaseless song.
I love his poetry. So are you feeling inspired by the stories you've heard tonight? We have delved into the fear of the unknown and a loss of purpose during our discussions. And now it's time to hear questions from our audience and bring you some more useful resources that can help you plan for your retirement. Joining us again is Bonnie Hendrickson from Life Song Coaching in Grand Rapids. Bill Lindberg from the Ash Grove Group from the Twin Cities is here too. And our special guest is Berenice Reeder, whose story about widowhood you saw earlier in the program. And all three of you, thanks for being back. Berenice, your story, when I heard it, my heart just was so heavy for you. And the fact that you and your husband went off on this wonderful adventure, then he gets sick.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Because all that took such an unexpected turn for you, how did you navigate the grief at first?
I'm a reader, not just my last name, okay? And I got 12 to 14 books. And from all areas, and I just read everything that I could read because I didn't know, my dad had died when I was 24, and so I understood grief, but I didn't have books at that time, and really they helped me first with understanding his death. And then from there, and it was like one was on resiliency, and I always thought resiliency was a personality type, and the man that wrote this book said, no, it's a choice. And so, those kinds of things, and about 2 weeks after Billy died, I just decided that I didn't want to put my heels in the ground. I'd watched so many people put their heels in the ground. I had a new life. It wasn't the new life that I necessarily would have chosen, but I had a new life. And so the word that came to me was embrace. And it's like, I am going to embrace this new life. I don't know where it's taking me. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to find my way.
So you obviously made a very intentional choice.
Yeah, right from the beginning.
Right.
Yes, I did.
And that leads me in then to talking about those intentional choices, because we all get to make choices. And I think some people forget that and they go through life with their blinders and they just kind of sleepwalk. So let's talk about that.
I would say, and I tell this to many coaching clients, that choice is empowering. When you don't have a choice, you feel like you don't have any power, you don't have any control over what's next. But when you start to make choices, even small choices, it gives you power. Gives you strength.
And you, Bill, living with intention as you are, in the wake of your melanoma that you had 10 years ago, I bet that really was a turning point then.
It was a huge turning point because this whole notion of choice and resilience, it's a skill and it takes practice. And I think Frederick Buechner talked about in the sense of vocation, that one's vocation is where your deep gladness meets the world's great need. And I think if you can identify that intersection, it's a powerful and empowering situation for you.
Now, we have something we're going to put on screen because this actually leads very nicely into this. Can you please explain this?
Ikigai.
Ikigai.
So Dan Buettner did a lot of research for National Geographic and wrote a couple of different books about the blue zones, the places in the world where people are thriving. They're living longer and they're living happier. One of those places is Okinawa, Japan. And Ikigai, the Ikigai model, comes out of the Japanese Okinawan philosophy that each of us has an Ikigai. Our Ikigai is basically what gives meaning and purpose to our lives. And the way that model works is that the Ikigai, your Ikigai, is the sweet spot between what you do well, what you love, what the world needs, and what you can draw value from. And for many people that's being paid, but for many retirees in the United States, they don't care if they're paid. They are at a place where they want to give back. So payment in some form.
I love that. I have to think about that. I like that a lot. So we got a couple questions. You want to take a shot at some questions? This is, and actually, Berenice, this might be for you. Ashley from Duluth says, you kind of went over it, but can you give examples as to what someone can do if their retirement plans got postponed because of illness?
You just have to face the days that you're in. You know, if illness comes your way, you don't have a choice on that. And you have to face those days. And if you live in like the place of, wow, I'm really missing out on life, you know, you're missing the point of what life is really about, because life presents itself to you and you get the opportunity to see if you can live it or not. You know, and so for me, when Billy was sick for about 6 months before they started really working on him, and 5 months before he died, you know, he was diagnosed. And so it was like those were days that we had to walk through. We needed to walk through, and we needed to walk through them well. Billy's goal was to finish well. And that's my goal too. You know, and I think part of finishing well is taking life as it comes to you and making the best of it. You know, we all get lemons. I mean, we've all had loss of some kind. And it's like, why not make lemonade, and why not share your lemonade with somebody else?
Bill, can you still find purpose as you navigate serious illness?
I would say you can, to whatever extent is possible. You can't be wildly enthusiastic if you're incapacitated in some way, but managing what you can and embracing help from others, reaching out, which is sometimes a very difficult thing to do.
I have an email from Tracy. My husband, she says, is a dairy farmer, and his biggest worry is what to do with his time. He's used to working 7 days a week, 12-hour days. That is a very definite problem.
That is a very huge problem for a lot of people looking at retirement. What am I going to do with all this structured time? I would encourage people to think about, as one of the other guests mentioned, your social network. You know, where can you interact with others? Also, community engagement is huge. Finding those opportunities in your community where you can give of yourself, give of your own time.
Those are all good. Actually, you know what? We have a minute left. I want to put up some of those resources. Yes, these are great resources, by the way. You mentioned my friend Dan Buettner, who I adore. That is a very good book. But I have to say my other friend, Chris Farrell's got a pretty good book too. And I also really like Richard Leiter. So I mean, all the three guys have got some really good books. Would you recommend anything else?
Actually, Bill and I were asked to put together some resources, and we put together a list of about 25.
Good.
Those others, the long list, is on my website at lifesongcoaching.com. So if viewers would like to look at more suggestions from Bill and I, it's at www.lifesong.com.
Oh, yes, and of course the aarp.org, but you have to click on Minnesota, right, Bill?
Right.
Okay. And I like the 50over50mn.org too. That's
absolutely. And one point about this is that lifelong learning and curiosity. There's a great motto for the OLLI, Osher Lifelong Learning Program in the Twin Cities, that curiosity never retires.
I love that.
And if you can keep an active learning edge, it's a powerful antidote that a dairy farmer or a seasoned executive can benefit from.
You were terrific. Thank you so much for being here. Great. It was a great conversation. Well, we've come to the end of our time tonight, which is too bad. I really love this, but we hope our discussion has helped you figure out what your retirement might look like. All of the resources we just mentioned are also available on our website, wdsc.org. Thanks to our great guests and to the studio audience for being here. We leave you now with more poetry from Gary Bullhauer. Enjoy it, and good night.
If the way is lost. If the way is lost in you, stop, breathe, pay attention. Step again onto the path of your belonging, the path that calls from the center of who you are and who you long to be. Claim the journey that belongs to your song, your story, your name. Claim this day as your next step, this day as a promise, as a small hope that wakes up something inside you that has been sleeping. Step to the center of that hope and let it surround you with light. Let go of everything that doesn't call your name, of all the baggage that keeps you in chains. Let go of your certainty and of your doubt, of your small plans and your grand designs. Take this step, this one in front of you. This breath, this step is the only path that brings you alive.